Hello, hello. It's been a minute. I I'm Nat. Let me say that first. I meant to get this video out at the beginning of June, and you'll see why, but I got COVID. So, I apologize for my voice and any throat clearing or coughing that might happen. I'm going to try to edit it out. So, hi, I'm back. A year ago, I made a video teaching you guys how to use Dan Harmon's story circle with Mulan as an example. If you haven't watched that yet, you can find it right here. It's one of my favorite videos I've ever made, and that's because it's about one of my favorite plot structures that I've ever used. I go into this in more detail in that video, obviously, but to give you a summary, the story circle makes writing a good story insanely easy because it basically forces you to work character development and theme into your plot. So, every time you use the story circle, you'll end up with a story that is character-driven and meaningful. I talked in that video about how the story circle gives you a really good high-level view of your story that you can then break down into plot beats if you want something more in-depth. And I actually had a few people say to me, hang on, what are plot beats? Like, you're just gonna say use plot beats and then not explain how to use plot beats? What? So, to celebrate the 1-year anniversary, technically, it's still June, of the Story Circle video, I want to spend the next few weeks teaching you all about plot beats in the 4-act story structure. Now, if I'm being honest, every plot structure is kind of the same. The character goes on a journey, learns new things, and uses those new things that they've learned to confront the antagonist at the end. But even though this storyline is the basic foundation for pretty much every story, there are so many different ways you can go about plotting it. And the way that you plot your book absolutely totally depends on who you are as an author. While one author might not be comfortable starting their book without a scene-by-scene outline, that same outline might make another author feel like they're boxed in and suffocating. So if you decide this isn't the plot structure for you, don't worry. It's not the only one out there. But it is something I use with almost every book that I write, along with the story circle, because I always start with the story circle. And for me, it's super helpful. So let's talk about plot beats and how you can use them to take your story to the next level. Don't forget to like, subscribe, everything. There's a bunch of links in the description. Do all that stuff. Thanks, guys. Love y'all. Okay, so when you are using plot beats, what you're doing is you're breaking the story down into parts in the same way that the story circle does and that a lot of other plot structures do. The thing that sets the 4-act structure and its story beats apart is that they're more in-depth. While the story circle gives you a very high-level overview of your character arcs and your plot beats make you dive further into the story and develop it more. And this might make the 4-act structure sound better, but be careful. The reason I always start with the story circle, even if I eventually go into plot beats later, is because the story circle helps me develop character arcs, character arcs are so important. I just can't even, I hope you guys know this after watching the rest of my videos. They're so important that I can't even find words for it. And I'm a writer, but basically without them, every single story will fall flat. And that is why I love the story circle so much. So today we're talking about the 4-act structure, but I've embellished it a little bit just to make sure that character development is there. So if you're only interested in using the 4-act structure, make sure you don't leave your character development in the dust. Your character is the most important part of all of this. So if you haven't guessed by now, the 4-act structure divides your story into 4 parts. Crazy, I know. The setup, the response, the attack, and the resolution. A quick side note before we get into all the plot beats in each... Why can't I say that? I've tried it so many times. A quick side note before we get into all the plot beats in each section. There we go. If you've heard of the 3-act structure, then at this point you're probably wondering, what's the difference between 3 and 4 acts? Why should I split my story into 4 parts instead of 3? Does it even matter? And here's the answer. Yes, because of the midpoint. The midpoint. I don't want to sit like this anymore. I'm so uncomfortable. Oh, also, as you can see, I've decided to go back to the tapestry. Mostly because my desk is not clean and I didn't want to clean it. And also, I kind of miss the tapestry. It's kind of like my homie. In the 3-act structure, the response and the attack get kind of squished together, which can make your second act feel muddy and aimless and a little incoherent. But in the 4-act structure, the midpoint is a clear, defining moment when your character makes a switch from playing defense and responding to what's happening to them to going on the offense and influencing and changing what's happening to them. That's why I like the 4-act structure more, and also why it goes so well with the story circle. So today I'll be giving you a brief overview of all of the parts of the 4-act structure, and then after that I'm going to give each part its own video to really break down how to use this plot structure to your advantage. And at the end of the series, I'm going to show you how these plot beats fit into the story circle so you can use them together. Okay, back to the plot beats. Let's start with Act 1, the setup. As you may have already guessed, the point of this act is to set up your story. This is where we accomplish the extremely important tasks of introducing our main character or characters, showing the audience what normal life is like, and setting the stage for the rest of the story to take place. Getting Act 1 right is crucial if you want the rest of the story to succeed. In fact, one of my favorite quotes about writing maybe ever is, if there is a problem in your last act, the problem is actually in your first act. So, with that being said, Act 1 goes like this: hook, setup, stating the theme, inciting incident, the debate, plot point 1, and pinch point 1. Let's dive deeper into those, starting with the hook. This plot point exists to start your story off with a bang. It's an immediate intro into your character's internal conflict, what they want versus what they fear. And the hook brings us right into the setup, where we introduce things like important settings and side characters, but the most crucial part of the setup is showing what normal life is like. This is our opportunity to create contrast between life before the inciting incident and life after. If you do the setup right, it will really emphasize how big of a deal the inciting incident is, and how much it could change the character's situation. Remember that there has to be conflict in the whole story. Just because the inciting incident hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that your story is conflict-free. That's why we talked about internal conflict for the hook. You keep that going here. Next is stating the theme. In this plot beat, the character hears the theme from another character, usually a mentor or a friend, but they don't quite understand it yet. The theme is the overall message of the story, the lesson the character will have to learn in order to succeed. If you don't know your theme yet, think about your character's misbelief. Your character believes something about the world that is wrong, and this misbelief affects, and usually ruins, their life. And in most stories, the theme is going to be opposite of that. The misbelief is going to tie together the want and the fear, and kind of the need. So let's say your character's misbelief is that they are unlikable. There has to be a memory that comes from, like probably a memory of rejection or bullying or something like that, where they learned that they're unlikable, and then that gives way to their want, which is maybe to go against the grain and be their own person and be unique and special, or to be mean to everyone else. Since no one likes them, they don't like anyone else. And so that's their want, right? And that's what they want to do based on their misbelief. The underlying fear is rejection, and the true need is acceptance and love. So all of that goes into that misbelief. I hope that makes sense. We'll probably cover it in depth more later. And once the theme is stated, so the theme for that misbelief would probably be like, you are worthy of love no matter what. So once that theme is stated, you're ready to hit your character with the inciting incident, or the call to action, or the catalyst. And my dog is drinking water. Are you done? Okay. Something happens here. You go. Stay hydrated. Good honey. This is not water. I'm not staying hydrated. Something happens here that shoves your character outside of their comfort zone and sets the rest of the story in motion. But be careful. This is not when the character decides to go. This is only the invitation. That's why I like the name Call to Action. It's not taking action, it's the call to action. I also like to sometimes call this plot beat the catalyst because it's the moment that changes the trajectory of your character's life. It's basically the start of the story. Even though everything before the inciting incident is very important, the inciting incident is where the rest of the story starts. Then comes the debate. The inciting incident has presented a way that your character might be able to get what they want, but they're wrestling with their fear. Instead of responding, here your character considers whether it's possible to accept this call to action while still staying away from what they're afraid of. TLDR, the character wants to accept the call to action, but they have to make sure it won't make their fear worse. After the debate, it's time for plot point 1, aka the point of no return. This is the moment that the character decides to accept the call to action that the inciting incident created. Their want is big enough that they're willing to risk running into a little fear to get to it. Here is where they make a decision that can't be undone, and they cross the point of no return. Pinch point 1 comes next, not immediately, but towards the end of Act 1. So if you're doing a scene-by-scene outline, these plot beats will be separated by scenes most of the time. They're not usually like bam, 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 one after the other. You'll see when we analyze a real story how it works, but they're plot beats. So they're different points of the book, but they're not like the whole book. Like there will be pieces in between. So this friendly little pinch point is here to remind your reader and your character that there is still an antagonistic force aiming for your character, and it's gonna get them later. And this antagonist doesn't have to be the usual kind of villain. For example, if you're writing an intense, realistic fiction, it could just be your character's internal conflict. I wrote a sci-fi action where the biggest antagonistic force was the character's internal conflict. It works in any genre, but for realistic fiction, that's mostly what you're gonna have to work with. So you can make your antagonist anything. In another scenario, it could be an event like, a weather thing, like in those tornado movies. In Sharknado, the Sharknado is the pinch point. I don't know, I've never seen that movie. But it could even be like an uprising in your character's town. So that brings us to Act 2, the response. In this act, your character is officially past the point of no return, which means some new challenges are heading their way. But they haven't quite learned how to navigate those things yet, so they're playing defense. I don't know if this is in my script later. If it's not, then I made a mistake because this is very important. So at this point, the character is reacting to what's happening to them, but they're not a passive character. They are still actively making decisions, going after things, doing things, but they're reacting instead of acting first. So they are still an active character. It's just a little bit out of order how they're going about things right now. This is the part of the book where your character struggles. They flounder. They wonder if they made the right choice. They doubt whether they really have what it takes to defeat the antagonistic force that they're facing. This is also the part where they learn how to cope with their new environment and, as a result, undergo a massive transformation. And honestly, one of my favorite, we're not at the story analyzing part yet, I can't help myself. One of my favorite examples of this is How to Train Your Dragon. Go watch that movie if you want to see an amazing second act. I love it so much. So here are the story beats in Act 2. Crossing the threshold, or break into 2, introduction of the B story, fun and games, and the midpoint. Let's start with crossing the threshold, or break into 2. Now that they've accepted the call to action and crossed the point of no return, the character has to start to adapt to their new situation. Reaching their want requires doing things that they haven't done before, but they're not going to do it alone. They can't. So here comes the B story, one of my favorite parts of writing a book. The A story is already underway. The A story is the character trying to get what they want, trying to reach their goal and stay away from their fear. But little do they know that they have to learn the theme in order to get there. And the B story is how they learn that theme. Most of the time, the B story comes in the form of very important side characters, and I'm wincing at myself because I'm an author and I say very so much, but extremely important side characters like a love interest, a best friend, or a mentor. So basically, the character meets someone here who throughout the story is going to teach them the theme. Once we reach the B story, the fun and games start. I love fun and games. This plot beat is exactly what it sounds like. Fun and games. Here, the character continues learning how to navigate the challenges that come with their new scenario, but it's not high stakes yet. The stakes will be higher later when the character is actually facing the antagonist, but right now they're focused on learning and bonding with the B story characters. Usually this act is more fun, light, and upbeat than the rest of the story. And then we hit the midpoints! Abby Emmons calls this plot point the game-changing midpoint, which I couldn't agree with more. The midpoint is a game changer. The midpoint is when something happens that forces the character to move away from defense and start playing offense. This is where they switch from reacting to what's happening to them to taking action first and taking control of the situation. Hey, I did put it in my script. Okay, here it is. This doesn't mean that the character was a passive character. In fact, it's a really bad idea to let your main character be passive. We want them acting and reacting the whole time. The midpoint is just when they finally have enough knowledge to act first, rather than decide what to do after something happens to them. So there is a more concise way of saying that. After the midpoint comes our next act, Act 3, the attack. This is when the stakes get higher. This is the act where things turn darker and more foreboding, where the antagonistic force gains more power, where the characters and readers start to really realize what they're in for. And it consists of bad guys close in, pinch point 2, a taste of success, if you want or if you can, disaster, dark moment, and lastly, the aha moment, or learning the theme. So, starting with bad guys closing in this plot point, the antagonist ramps up their efforts. The fun and games are clearly over, and our main character is starting to see what the antagonist is fully capable of. So I would say in Mulan, since we did Mulan in the story circle, Mulan is probably, bad guys close in probably starts when they come across the village that the Huns have just attacked and like left desolate and empty. So it's like a clear switch from we're training to fight the bad guys, to oh shit, there are bad guys. It's here that your cast of characters realizes the time to learn how to fight is over and the time to actually fight has begun. So here, the main character starts to put their new skills to use, but they only manage to push away the bad guys. They're not quite powerful enough to beat the villain yet because they haven't learned the theme, so they're buying time. They're bargaining. Then we are at pinch point 2. As with the first one, this pinch point is a reminder of how powerful and foreboding your antagonist is. This is a great place for a mini disaster to happen. Pinch points exist to ramp up the tension and make things feel even more dangerous and intense. So take this opportunity to do that. Take this opportunity to really scare your readers and your characters into thinking like things are bad, because they are. After pinch point 2 is where a taste of success comes in. If you want or if you can. This is the moment that your character is so close to success, they can almost taste it. They're just a few feet away from the finish line. They're almost there. What they have been aiming for this whole time is so close, and they are desperate to finally reach it. Like I said, this plot point is optional, and you can add it if it fits in your story, but it's not crucial. That being said, if you can include it, you should, because if you let your character get within inches of their goal, it makes the makes the next plot point feel even worse for everyone involved, characters and readers alike. And that is what we want, because the next plot beat is disaster. Your character's worst fear comes true. That's all this plot point needs to be. It doesn't need to be some massive disaster that destroys the whole town or puts the entire world in danger. It just needs to put the character's entire world in danger. This is what your character has been running from all along. This was their reason for accepting the call to action. They have been desperately avoiding their fear, like skirting around it, pushing it away, and now they can't anymore. In the disaster plot point, their fear becomes reality. Oh man. It's heavy stuff. If you do it right, it's heartbreaking. It's after disaster hits, your character's like beat up, worn out. They don't have energy to keep going. All they can do is fall into their dark moment, or their dark night of the soul if you want to be extra about it. Here, all is lost. Your character has reached the end of the rope. They are out of ideas, they are out of energy, they are out of time. There's nothing else they can do but succumb to their misbelief, the reason why they fear what they fear. This is your time to really, as much as I hate to say it, this is your time to really rub salt in the wound. Make your protagonist and your readers think there's no way out. Make them wonder how this story could possibly resolve. Like, you know that feeling when you're watching a movie and there's 10 minutes left and you're like, how are they gonna fix this? That's the feeling that you want here. Make them worry that maybe the character will never get what they truly want. Maybe the goal they have been chasing is unattainable. Maybe it's hopeless. But unless you're writing a tragedy, which I think I'll do a video on later because I love negative arcs so much, your story has a happy ending, which means it's not hopeless. Your character just hasn't learned the theme yet. And this is where the aha moment comes in. In order to learn the theme, they need some help, whether it be from the B-story character or from the mentor who first told them the theme all the way back in Act 1. In the aha moment, they realize why the theme is true and why their misbelief is so wrong. Which means this is the moment that they realize that what they need is not what they want. They've been chasing their want this whole time, and now they know that is the wrong goal. Once your character knows their need, discovers their need, their desire to get that need should be strong enough that it gives them the perseverance to pick themselves up and get ready for the finale. Which means we have reached Act 4, the resolution. This act is where everything you've been setting up so far comes together. It's the high point, the culmination. In Act 4, we have the revival, the climax, and the final image. Let's start with the revival. I really can't see you guys. This is how large the text on my script is so that I can read it. From 2 feet away. Okay. This is the little in-between space where your character gets up, dusts themselves off, and starts preparing for the climax. As you'll see in a second, the 4-act structure climax has 5 parts, and the first 2 are gathering the team and executing the plan. This beat is the part where the character starts deciding who they need on that team and starts creating that plan. At this point, your character should be a little bit like a bulldozer, like willing to do anything and everything to reach their need. After the revival, we go right into the climax. This is it. The moment your whole story has been leading up to. This entire time you have been preparing your character to face off against the antagonistic force. Now is when we get to see, did the protagonist learn what they needed to learn in order to succeed? Do they finally get to win against this villain and get their need? A suspenseful, surprising, satisfying climax consists of 5 parts. Gathering the team, executing the plan, the high tower surprise, which is one of my favorites, digging deep down, and finally executing the new plan. Each of these 5 parts is equally important, and if you really nail them, you're going to have a climax that blows your readers out of the water. So let's start with gathering the team. Unless you're writing a crazy survival story like The Revenant, which I haven't seen, but I'm pretty sure it's mostly just Leonardo DiCaprio trying not to die, then your character has been meeting people throughout the entire plot. And even if your story has a smaller cast, they still at least met the B-story character. These are the people that they're going to want to gather to face off against the villain. They need their team around them. If your character is hyper-independent, it makes sense to not have this step. Like my character in the book I just finished writing, the climax was just her. So that makes sense. If it calls for it, do it that way. Follow your writer instinct. Once they have their team, the character is ready to execute the plan. Back in the revival plot beat, the character made a plan for how they were going to approach the antagonist to try to get their need once and for all. And this is where they put that plan into action. But, of course, because we're writing a story that is designed to keep readers entertained, not everything goes according to plan. The high tower surprise, can you guys tell that I love the high tower surprise? The high tower surprise comes out of nowhere and hits the protagonist where it hurts, and they aren't expecting it at all. It ruins their plan and knocks them off kilter in the middle of all of the tension and stress of the climax. So, they have to dig deep down. In the face of the high tower surprise, the protagonist has to remember why they're doing what they're doing. They channel their desire for their need, they remind themselves of the theme, and they recalibrate. They have to change their plan on a dime to navigate the high tower surprise, which brings them to the last part of the climax, executing the new plan. In a final effort to beat the antagonist, the main character executes their new plan. This is the big battle, the last thing standing between your character and their need. And once the climax is over, we go into the final image, the last beat of the whole plot. This is your chance to show your audience how much your character has changed since the start of their story, and how accepting the theme has affected their life. The final image is the last thing the reader sees before they close the book, so make it good. Tie up loose ends, make it emotionally satisfying, and give the reader the resolution they have been aching for the entire story. Or, if you're writing a negative arc, do the opposite. So there you have it, a brief overview of the 4-act story structure. If you want a PDF of the summary I went over in this video, you can click the link in the description. Like I said at the top, in the next few videos, I will be breaking down each act and showing you guys how it fits into a tried and true story. And finally, I'll be illustrating how you can work it into the story circle for some extra plotting help. Until then, please give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful for you, and I will see you sometime. Happy writing, happy plotting, have so much fun, and until next time, happy trails!